Are you new to collecting comics, or maybe you haven't even started yet, but you want to lay down the foundation for a quality comic book collection? Then this video is for you. With a budget of $100, I will share the 10 comic books I would start with if I were going to start a comic collection in 2022. Let's go. A few weeks back, I was hanging out and a YouTube notification popped up on my phone letting me know that our buddy Swagglehauss had posted a new video on his channel. As it turned out, the new video was titled Top 10 Comic Books I Would Pick to Start My Comic Collection in 2022 on a Budget. I pulled up the video, and as soon as I finished watching it, I immediately DM'd Mickey and I told him that I was stealing his video idea, so here we are. In keeping with the parameters he laid out in his video, I'm sticking with 10 books and a $100 budget, though I also want to parrot his thoughts that there is value in taking your $100 or whatever size budget you have and starting out by putting those funds all in a single book. I'm generally an advocate for quality over quantity, but here I'm just playing by the rules. As you watch this video, think about what books you would put on your own list and share it with me down in the comments. I can't wait to see what everyone comes up with. And now, let's get into the list. In the number 10 spot, I would pick the Image First version of The Walking Dead. This book reprints The Walking Dead #1, which is a classic modern comic from Tony Moore and Robert Kirkman. The simple truth is there are not a lot of first prints out there, and you certainly can't touch this book for a $100 budget. To boil it all down, this is a fun book. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's just going to be one of those things that looks pretty cool in your collection as you're just starting out. The best part about Image First Walking Dead #1 is that you can pick it up for around $5 right now, so it's not going to take much of your budget to put a pretty cool book in your collection right out of the gate. Next on the list, the number 9 book is G.I. Joe #53. This one is on the list for a couple of reasons. G.I. Joe is super nostalgic for a lot of people like me that grew up in the 80s and early 90s. And this Snake Eyes cover is just really cool. But the main reason I picked this book is that it's one of the Marvel 25th anniversary covers. The 25th anniversary covers are very collectible. You have a lot of collectors in the market that go through and try and gather all of these things up. The good thing is most of the books are relatively inexpensive. Like this one, you can pick up G.I. Joe 53 for $5 right now on average, and this issue checks a couple of boxes. You get the nostalgia from the G.I. Joe, you get a really cool Snake Eyes cover, plus you get the 25th anniversary edition. And with this book being relatively inexpensive, it's a great book to help you flesh out your collection as you're just getting started. Next up, I picked Superman #75 for the number 8 spot. This book is a classic. It's really one of the first books that really just kind of went nuts in pop culture. This is a book that when it came out, you had people who didn't collect comic books going into comic stores and buying copies of it and trying to find it. And honestly, because of that, this book is everywhere. Of course, it's the classic Death of Superman issue. The book went through multiple printings, and really there's no other way to put it other than to say that it was massively overprinted, which is why you can find this thing for $5 today. Now, if you want to get a first print, you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to find that right deal. You're going to have to work your or best offers on eBay, but you can still, even in today's world, pick this thing up for around $5 if you're patient and if your negotiating skills are on point. I think it's a great book to have just due to the sensation that it was when it came out. It's a recognizable book, and it's one of those books I chose really to add some diversity into the list. I could throw nothing but Marvel books on this list and it'd be easy, but I think a collection with variety in it is a healthy collection, so that's why I decided to add Superman 75 to the list. Next up, coming in at number 7, is Daredevil 227. I love this issue. It's a classic Frank Miller story with a Dave Mazzucchelli cover that I just can't get enough of. It's the first issue of the Born Again story arc, which is hands down, my favorite Daredevil story that was ever written. If you haven't read it, I implore you, pick up the trade. You can find the singles fairly inexpensively as well. Just whatever you need to do, get a hold of Born Again and read this thing if you haven't yet. The story starts off hot and heavy in this issue as you have Kingpin learning the identity of Daredevil, and as the story progresses, he just makes life worse and worse for our hero. I won't spoil any more than that. Definitely check this story arc out if you're not familiar with it. Most of the issues of this story arc are really inexpensive, and you can pick up the majority of them for right around the $5 mark, just like you can this issue. In the number 6 spot is Uncanny X-Men number 201. Now the thing here is, it was an inevitable. I had to have an X-Men book on this list. There's just no way around it. It would be almost unheard of since the 80s and 90s for there to be any comic collection that didn't have at least one X-Men comic in it. So X-Men 201 is my choice for this list. The reason I like this book is, one, the cover's great. It's a classic Cyclops versus Storm story as they're fighting it out to figure out who's going to be the leader of the X-Men team. Not only that, you get the first appearance of Cable as a baby, and it's just an all-around really cool book. This issue comes from a time period where nearly everybody in the world that was reading comic books was buying X-Men at that point, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. So I think it's a great example of an X-Men book that anyone would be proud to have in their collection, and it's an issue that's fairly sought out by collectors in general. So having an issue like 201 in your collection right out of the gate is going to give you a great starting point, whether you want to work backwards or forwards from that as you begin working on an X-Men run, which is one of the more common runs people in the hobby work on filling out. This issue, despite it being fairly desirable amongst X-Men fans, will only set you back about $10, so it's not a real budget buster, but it's a very cool book and adds a lot of value for not a lot of expense. Next up, in the number 5 spot, I have Spider-Man Unlimited number 1. This is another $10 book, so it's not overly expensive. It doesn't hit our budget very hard, but it's got a lot packed into it. This is, in my opinion, a classic cover, which, if you've noticed, there's a lot of things I'm calling a classic cover in this list, because the whole point of this is we're trying to hit the ground running. We want to start our collection in the right direction. We want to pump it full of quality stuff right out of the gate. So we've got another classic cover. This book also starts the Maximum Carnage storyline. So this is part 1 of Maximum Carnage, and to go along with that, it's also the first appearance of Shriek, which is one of Carnage's more common accomplices. On top of that, you also get the first appearance of the Ravencroft Institute. So this book's got a lot going on for it. It's not hard to find. There's a lot of them out there. It's a beefy issue, so you get a lot of bang for your buck, really, as far as if you want to read it. And like I said, only at $10. It's a great value add for your collection. Moving on to the number 4 spot, we have Batman 497. This is one of the most well-known modern Batman books that there are. In this issue, you have Bane breaking Batman's back. It's right there on the cover, so it's a very recognizable book, even for somebody who may just be dipping their toes into the comic book world. This is part 11 of the 790-part Nightfall arc, but best of all, it's still just another $10 book, so it's not going to break the budget. Another reason for this book, it's a classic modern DC issue, and as I mentioned before, having a little variety in your collection is important, so Batman 497 is our second DC book on the list. Coming in at number 3 is Spider-Man number 1, the Silver Edition. This book is very recognizable. The Todd McFarlane cover is swiped all of the time. It's really one of the 90s most recognizable covers. In addition, this number 1 starts off with part 1 of the Torment story arc that played out through the first several issues of the new Spider-Man title. Solo title number 1s are a great hopping on point, so an issue like Spider-Man number 1 is a great place for a new collector to start. Our number 2 book is Secret Wars number 1, part 1 of the 12-part Secret Wars crossover event that happened in the 1980s that really brought all of our Marvel characters together for a big event for the first time. Of course, we all know the main thing that happens throughout this story arc is we get the new black costume from Spider-Man in issue 8, but that one's a little outside of our budget. Now, the thing to point out with this book is prices have gone up a little bit in recent years, so to get this one at the $20 budget I've laid out for it here, you're going to have to look for like a fine or a very fine copy. One thing as you're starting out your collection that I think everybody needs to be aware of is that you don't have to have all near mint issues in your collection. If you're truly just collecting, having a book is having a book. It doesn't necessarily matter if you have all near mints, all 9/8, whatever. If you're just collecting, having a book's having a book. Now, if you're more on the investing side, if that's more what you're interested in, then getting the highest grade copies possible is going to be more important to you, specifically probably 9/8 if you are looking to maximize your return on investment down the road. But we're talking about collecting here, so that's why I want to emphasize having a book is better than not having a book. Low grade is better than no grade. So for Secret Wars number 1, we're going to be focusing on that 6.0 to 8.0 range to get the price point where we need it to be at $20. And our number 1 book, the crown jewel of our young comic collection, is none other than Spawn number 1. This Todd McFarlane classic features the first appearance of Spawn, Malebolgia, Sam and Twitch, and many more characters we know from the Spawn universe. Of course, this is one of the early Image number 1 issues that came out after many of the top creators in the industry left and established Image Comics. They all launched their number 1s. This book is easily one of the most popular single issues from the 90s. There are a ton of them out there, which is part of the reason why it's almost more surprising to find a collection that doesn't have a Spawn 1 in it, which is kind of why I picked this. Spawn 1 is just one of those books that I think deserves to be in everybody's collection. I may be a little biased because I was a huge Spawn fan when I first got into the hobby. I still look back on those early issues very nostalgically, so it's not really surprising to me that I wound up picking Spawn number 1 to kind of be the number 1 book, the top dog in this list. With the number of Spawn 1s that are out there, you can find this thing at a variety of price points depending on grade. Right now, the book is in a little bit of a lull. Prices are coming down a shade, so you should be able to pick this thing up around $20, which would round out our $100 budget. You could probably find it cheaper if you find one that's in a more of a mid-grade or has some more damage to it, or if you wanted to hold out and get something like a newsstand version or just a really cherry copy, you could definitely spend more than $20 on a Spawn 1. But I think if I were looking to start a comic collection, Spawn 1 would be one of the first issues I would seek out. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the whole collection here. We have Walking Dead number 1, the Image first version. We have G.I. Joe 53, Superman 75, Daredevil 227, Uncanny X-Men 201, Spider-Man Unlimited 1, Batman 497, Spider-Man 1, the Silver Edition, Secret Wars number 1, and we round out our top 10 with Spawn number 1. The thing I like most about this collection is that we have a good variety to it. You've got 80s books, you've got 90s books, Marvel, DC, and Image books, first appearances, and major story arcs are also represented here. Every book on this list would fit right in any comic collection, which is what makes this starter list accessible for a large number of collectors who are just starting out. The best part is that these books are only suggestions, and there are countless other books that could be swapped into this list to make it your own, because ideally, that's what it's all about, building a collection of comics that speak to you and reflect who you are as a comic collector. If you'd like to see other great budget-minded comic suggestions, then be sure to check out this video right up here. Happy hunting out there, and don't forget to collect responsibly. I'll see you in the next video.